continue with factoring. So we're going to factor trinomials in the form x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, you don't have anything in front of the x squared except 1. And b and c are just any number. Okay, so the steps to solve these. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, you want to identify your b and c. Okay, so the second thing you want to do you just want to find the same two numbers that multiply together to give you whatever your c is and add together to give you whatever your b is. So find two numbers that multiply to give you c and add to give you your b value. Okay. So the third thing you're going to do is you're going to place the answers from step 2 as a factor. So place your answers from step 2 in the form. So it'll be either x plus or minus, depending on if it's positive or negative. And that will be your first number, which we don't know what it is, and x plus or minus whatever the number happens to be. So those two answers from step 2 will just go in there. If it's positive 4 and let's say negative 8, then it would be x plus 4, x minus 8. Oh, let me move that up a little bit. Alright, so let's say, for example, we wanted to factor x squared plus 7x plus 12. Okay, and remember, it's in the form x squared plus bx plus c. So that means for your x squared plus 7x plus 12, your b is equal to 7. And your c is equal to 12. Okay. And remember your steps, you want to find two numbers that multiply to equal c, and those same two numbers add to equal b. So that means we're looking for two numbers that multiply to equal 12, and those same two numbers add to equal 4. I mean, 7. That was actually one of the answers, and I kind of jumped ahead in my mind. Equals 7. Okay. So 4 and 3 works for both of them. You have 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 plus 3 is 7. So that means your answer, remember, it's in the x squared plus bx plus c form. That's going to be x. That's positive 4, so that's going to be plus 4. That's positive 3, so it's going to be plus 3. And that's your answer. Okay. Any questions on that one? Okay. So it should look a little familiar from Math 70. Hopefully this is just a refresher.
Yeah, there's like a couple different methods.
Oh yeah, there's a couple. This is, to me, the most straightforward. All right. Oh, thank you. Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've taught just class too.
Okay, no problem. All right, so let's say, for example, we want to factor x squared minus 12x plus 35. Okay, so whenever you see a negative term, you know at least one of your factors will be negative. Maybe one, maybe both. But you know at least one's going to be negative. Minus sign means at least one factor will be negative. Okay, so first we identify our b and our c. So we have x squared minus 12x plus 35. That means your b is equal to negative 12, and your c is equal to 35. Okay, so that means we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal your c. And those same two numbers have to add to equal your b. Okay. Now with this one, since you know one of them has to be negative, one has to be positive, well, not one has to be at least negative, they can both be negative. If you look at negative 7 and negative 5, they work for both. So if you have negative 7 times negative 5, you get positive 35. And if you have negative 7 plus negative 5, you have negative 12. Okay, so all you have to do, plug in those two answers. You know it's going to be x and x here. So it'll be minus 7 and minus 5. So that'll be your answer. Just H1. And you're all done. All right. Any questions on that one? Yes.
I just have a question.
Sure.
I always learned that like the plus sign at the end means like the signs like are the same. So if there's like a minus sign there and you see a plus sign at the end, that means they're the same.
It is, but there are so many little different rules to try to remember that. I try to cut back as many as possible, so the less you have to remember. But yeah, if you,
true, right?
yeah, it is true.
Okay.
So if you have a positive here and a negative here, that means that both are going to be negative. But if you have a positive here and a negative here, then one will be positive, one will be negative, but the higher number will be negative. There's so many little different rules. If you try to remember all of that, it'll be really complicated. So I try to simplify it to just one rule. At least one will be negative. No problem. All right. Okay. Now, in some cases, you can actually factor out a greatest common factor first and then simplify it. So let's say if you have, In some cases, you can factor out a value before factoring or before solving. Okay, so let's say if we have our example, let's say if we wanted to factor 3x squared minus 24x minus 60. Okay. So for this one, remember it has to be in the form x squared plus bx plus c, which means we can't have anything in front of the x squared. Just so happens we can factor 3 out of each of those terms. So for 3x squared minus 24x minus 60, we can factor out a 3. Because we have 3 times x squared minus 24 is just 8 times 3. 3 times 8x. And 60 is just 20 times 3. 3 times 20. So if you factor the 3 out of all of those and brought that out to the front, you're left with x squared minus 8x minus 20. Okay, so now you can just solve that in there. Okay, so that means you're looking for two numbers. Oh, forgot to identify my A, B, and C. Well, your B, rather, is equal to negative 8. And your C is negative 20. So you want to find two numbers that multiply to equal negative 20. And those same two numbers add to equal negative 8. Okay. Now this middle number being negative means that the larger number will be negative.
And then the end is negative, so you have a negative and a positive.
Yep, so it's going to be negative and positive. Okay, so if you look at it, negative 10 and positive 2 works. So negative 10 plus times 2 is negative 20. And negative 10 plus 2 is negative 8. Now the thing is, once you factor out, your answer has to have that 3 in front of it. You just factored the inside. So you have x minus 10 and x plus 2. There we go. Okay, so you don't want to forget your 3. Do not forget your factor value. All right, so any questions on that one? All right, leave that up for a few seconds. Okay, so let's say, for example, if we want to factor n squared plus 18n plus 65. Okay, so we know that our B and C, our B is equal to 18, and our C is equal to 65. Which means we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal our C, which is 65, and those same two numbers add to equal our B, which is 18. Now, usually you can't just immediately think of numbers for problems like this. So whenever you can't think of the solution to that one, you want to look at the factors of your C value. Okay. So here we have our factors of 65. And here we're going to add those two factors together. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay. So we know we have 1 times 65. So if we add them together, 1 plus 65 is equal to 66. So we know we're not going to use that because we need it to equal 18. Okay. We also have 5 times 13. So 5 plus 13 is equal to 18, which is exactly what we're looking for. Okay, so we know we can use 5 and 13. So 5 times 13 is 65, and 5 plus 13 is 18. Okay, so now we can just go ahead and plug it in. So you have n plus 5 times n plus 13. All right, so any questions on that one? All right. All right, so let's say if we have to factor, say d squared minus 18d plus 56. Okay. So looking at this one, since that's positive, we already know that both would have to be negative. Or at least one. Always go by the at least one idea if you can't remember all the little rules. Okay, so we know for d squared minus 18d plus 56 that our b is equal to negative 18 and our c is equal to 56. Okay, which means we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal our c and two numbers that add to equal our b. Okay, so, and again, we know at least one is negative since you have a minus sign. Okay, so what if we have, remember we're looking for our factors of C for this one. Okay, so we have our factors of 56 and we have our sum of the factors. Okay, so we can have 1 times negative 56. So if we add those together, we'll just end up with negative 55. So 1 plus negative 56 negative 55. Probably should move that over a little bit more. Give me a little more room. There we go. Alright, so we know that 1 plus negative 56 is negative 55, so we know we're not going to use that one, because we're looking for negative 18. And even if you switch them around and made it negative 1 times negative 56, negative 1 plus negative 56, still won't give us what we're looking for. So that would be negative 57, which again is wrong. Okay, you have 2 times 28, so let's say 2 times negative 28. So 2 plus negative 28 is negative 26. Okay, which again is wrong. It's not what we're looking for. So negative 2 times negative 28. So you have negative 2 plus negative 28 is negative 30, which again is not what we're looking for. Okay. So what if you have 4 times 14? So 4 times negative 14. Okay, so 4 plus negative 14 equals negative 10. So that's not what we're looking for. But if we go negative 4 times negative 14, negative 4 plus negative 14 is actually equal to negative 18. So we found one. So negative 4 and negative 14, negative 4 and negative 14. Actually, don't need the asterisk there. Okay, so we know that this will factor into d minus 4 and d minus 14. Excuse me. Okay, so this is just a way to kind of get those problems that have the numbers that don't jump out at you immediately. If you can find the factors of the factors of whatever your c is, then usually you can run into it. Okay, so let's say if we want to factor y squared plus 95y plus 94. Now when you see they just differ by one value or one number, then it's pretty straightforward for those. Those are pretty easy. So if we have y squared plus 95y plus 94, where your b is equal to 95 and your c is equal to 94, to find two numbers that multiply to equal 94 and those same two numbers add to equal 95, you can just pick 94 and 1. Okay, so if you saw 101 y plus 100, then you just use 101. Okay, so that means this will just factor into y plus 94 times y plus 1. All right, any questions on that one? All right. I think everyone's done. So let's say for our next example, if we wanted to factor, say c squared plus 7cd minus 44d squared. Okay. Now, whenever you have a squared variable in the first term and the last term, then you can kind of skip it throughout the process. So I'll show you what I mean. Since the first term, which is that one, has a c squared, and the last term has a d squared, the factor will have the form, it will be c plus or minus something times d, and c plus or minus something times d. So you may see some of them with r and s, you may see x and y. Whenever you have a squared variable in the first and the last one, you already know it's going to end up like this. We just have to find out what's going to be in front of the d. Okay, so if we have our c squared plus 7cd minus 44d squared, we know our b is equal to 7, and our c is equal to negative 44. Okay, so we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal negative 44, and those same two numbers have to add to equal 7. Okay. And again, if the number doesn't jump right out at you, it's pretty normal. That's when you go for your factors of c. Okay. So you have at least a minus sign, so you know at least one's going to be negative. So you want to have the factors of 44 and the sum of the factors. Okay, we can start with negative 44 and 1, which we already know. They add together to give you negative 43, which means we're not going to use that one. If you made both of them negative, that would give you negative 45, which we know is not the answer. If we made the 1 negative, we already know that's not going to give us the answer. That would give us positive 43. Okay, so we can see there, since this is positive, that we know that the biggest number would have to be positive. Because when the smaller number, the biggest number has to be positive. The smaller number is positive, you're going to end up with a negative number when you add them together. So we can see there we're looking for a positive number. Okay, so let's try 2 and 22, since 2 times 22 is 44, since those aren't working. So say 2 times negative 22. That would be negative 20. And negative 2 times 22. That would be positive 20. So neither one of those work. What if we try 4 times negative 11? Since 4 and 11 is 44. If we add them together, we will get negative 7. But if we do negative 4 and positive 11, if we add them together, we will actually get positive 7. So, it may not be the quickest method for some problems, but it is a strategy. Okay, so we know we can use negative 4, positive 11, and negative 4, positive 11 for both.